Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Your Business Incorporated, a look at the world of business, finance, investments, and economy at this time here on Channels Television. I am Bosu Dumafai. Welcome to the program. Let's spend the next 30 minutes together. Nigeria's integrated energy provider, Forte Oil, reports higher revenue of 84.4 billion naira in the first half of 2016. And South Africa's Financial Services Board promises to look into a programming error at the GSE. And companies from China and Africa signed more than 40 deals totaling nearly 20 billion US dollars. Welcome to the program. Now let's get started with the first story as far as the earnings are concerned. South Africa's third biggest bank, that's Barclays Bank, reported a 7% rise in half-year profit. That was today. There's a slower growth, however, arising from interest rates and home heat consumption and investment spending in Southern Africa. Diluted earnings per share, which is South Africa's main profit measure, increased 7% to 856.7 cents in the 6 months ended June the 30th. That compared with a growth rate of 11% a year earlier. Barclays Chief Executive Maria Ramos said in South Africa that business confidence remains weak, and the combination of weak job growth, higher inflation, and rising interest rates have placed a strain on consumer finance. Barclays Bank is declaring a 2% higher interim dividend of 460 cents per share. We're sticking with the earnings now on Wall Street. Amazon.com has reported better than expected rise in quarterly revenue powered by blockbuster growth in its cloud services unit. Amazon's web retail sales in the United States and globally, the core of its businesses, also topped expectations, and the company's forecast revenue ahead of the outlook for the third quarter. Meanwhile, strong earnings from Amazon and a boost to the company's stocks have made its founder, Jeff Bezos, the world's third richest person. Mr. Bezos owns 18% of Amazon shares, which was up 2% in trading on Friday. Forbes estimated his fortune to be 65.3 billion US dollars. And sticking with Wall Street, Alphabet, that's Google's parent company, has continued to see its quarterly profit boosted by strong advertising sales on mobile devices. Revenue in the April to June period was 21.3% to 21.5 billion US dollars. That's against $17.7 billion a year earlier. Net income for the quarter was 4.9 billion US dollar. That's up from 3.9 billion a year ago. Alphabet A's shares price was up 6% in after-hours trading on Thursday. That's the rise following 17% increase in first quarter revenue. Google also made progress in the video market, which has put the company in fierce competition with Facebook and Twitter. Look at the Asian markets for today, and all eyes on the Bank of Japan, what you call no helicopter money, and holding interest rates unchanged and inflation forecast. In Asia, the Japanese yen, as the currency climbed more than 2% against the US dollar early today, tapered off a little bit, but it's now coming back to about 1.89%. Japan decided to keep interest rate on hold after a two-day meeting ended on Thursday. The BOJ also kept its target for government bond buying unchanged. We see bond yields rising today on those decisions. But the central bank says it will double its annual purchase of exchange-traded funds, or ETF, to a record 6 trillion yen from the current 3.3 trillion yen. Meanwhile, the Nikkei 225, that's the benchmark index, headed lower after that decision, but the benchmark index clawed into positive territory at the end of Friday's session. Elsewhere in Asia, China's benchmark Shanghai Composite Index was lower by 0.3% today. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng was down 0.9% to end the week, and South Korea's Kospi down about 0.2%. A lot about the European trading day. The German DAX making some gentle gains today. All eyes on what comes on later today. The European bank stress test results. However, bigger story also from the US regarding the second quarter GDP and the earnings we're all talking about. Let's get across to my colleague at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, Janelle Dumalon, who is the financial correspondent for DWTV. standing in there for Channels Television. Janelle, it's good to see you on the program. Let's get started. The BOJ is the big story for the Asian markets today. We're talking about the helicopter money, the stimulus, the asset bond buying program, what's called the ETF, a record 6 trillion yen. Then we've seen the yen, the currency, up today, but yields on Japanese bonds heading north as well. That's the negative territory. Talk to us about this.
Yes, as you mentioned in that report earlier, the markets did show themselves to be very underwhelmed by the BOJ's sort of very moderate kind of mood. It didn't really do much to change its stimulus program. It hasn't really offered any new monetary easing, and it's left its rate unchanged. So there's no real change going on there, and investors were definitely expecting more. As we saw earlier, most Asian markets closed lower. European shares have been quite mixed. You can see the DAX behind me and how it's been moving. And yes, although there is one thing to look out for, the Bank of Japan did say that it was assessing the effect of negative interest rates and its massive asset buying program. So we may yet see a major restructure of the stimulus program that it has on the table now. And that's something that investors will definitely be watching out for.
Yeah, back at home where you are in Europe, the bank's stress tests will be coming out later today. What's the market expecting? Who's likely going to be making the stress test? You remember when the U.S. Fed did something similar a few weeks ago, 28 U.S. banks made it, Deutsche Bank and one other commercial bank failed. So what are expectations?
Exactly. Everyone is waiting for the results of these tests to come out after the markets closed. And as you've mentioned, all eyes will be on Deutsche Bank and Santander because they have been notorious repeat offenders, especially when it comes to U.S. bank stress tests. Now, arguably, though, apart from Deutsche Bank and Santander, even more eyes will be on Italy's Monte dei Paschi di Siena, which is sitting on $30 billion worth of non-performing loans. Although it has to be said, ahead of the release of these results, talks on how to rescue this bank have been going on in high gear, and it's these talks that have helped fuel the rise of this bank's share price more than 6% in today's trading.
Yes, now let's wrap up this conversation from the world of technology, as he put it. Internet-based service companies, Amazon, Google's parent company, Alphabet, Facebook, all making money. What's driving it? Is it because we live in a world that is now called the Internet of Things? Is the Internet the world's new economy? We can't do without it. We can't live without it. And those are the guys who are making money.
Yes, exactly. Those guys are making so much money. They are making billions. And the common denominator there, of course, is online advertising, especially the switch to mobile advertising. Everybody is on their mobile phones these days, and that has blessed these companies with billions. And it's interesting because they're also going head to head as to how to secure these advertising revenues. Facebook, for example, said the other day it was pushing deeper into search advertising, and that's, for example, where you have ads placed on the pages of search engine results, which is something we know that Google has been dominant in for as long as we can remember. So yes, the competition for advertising revenue will definitely get hotter, and we will only see these companies get richer.
Janelle, we will not be having this conversation. We're not going to have this conversation without internet. I'm sure I'm right. Yes. So this conversation, this two-way Lagos-Frankfurt conversation is thanks to Internet of Things. Thank you. Do have a great weekend. Janelle Dumalon, our colleague at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, GWTV for Channels Television. We'll take a break. When we come back, we have the International Monetary Fund perhaps being a little bit overly optimistic about the state of things in Eurozone. Stick around. We have more earnings also from Nigeria to talk about.